do it from 50. On my third honk.
Yep. 2.
Alright, if you clicked on this video, I know exactly the type of rider that you are. You want flashy looks, high horsepower, and all the features and benefits that a motorcycle could possibly offer you. And that's why you're probably interested in this Honda Fireblade right here. This is Honda's $28,000 homologated race bike, electronic suspension, everything you could possibly want on this machine. 215 horsepower, it's absolutely out of control, and you don't care how many testicles you need to sell to get one. But in fact, Honda still makes a CBR1000RR, which is half the price of a Honda Fireblade SP. Now, this motorcycle still features 1000 cc's, tons of horsepower, tons of electronics, tons of features and benefits, and it costs half the price. So today we're gonna find out if this Honda Fireblade is actually half the Fireblade of that one over there. Alright guys, today it's leader bike versus leader bike. Street squids the world over are squealing with joy as we're going to compare these motorcycles today. You guys know the deal. This is our Honda Fireblade we are giving away. Hit the links down below to yammie.co. Find out how you can get entered to win this amazing motorcycle. And Spite, where did we get this other Fireblade over here?
Yeah, so we just actually found it on the street and then I wheeled it in.
Like all of our giveaway bikes.
Random Fireblade. No, this one was lent to us by a buddy of mine who actually uses it as his daily rider. He rides this thing around all the time. He's got like 16,000 miles on this motorcycle.
Nice.
And he specifically told us to ride it like we stole it. So
can do.
there are many stories behind him and his interesting behavior on this motorcycle.
Yep.
I mean, it's a leader bike and he rides it on the daily, so.
Just one of those guys.
Just one of those guys.
Yeah.
So he's lent it to us for the day, and that we're going to see if it can stack up against the CBR Fireblade over there, the big fancy one.
Yeah, so let's dive into some specs and understand what makes this Fireblade so different from this one. Now, if you want a full lowdown on the specs on this bike, we've done tons of videos on it. Check out all of our other videos on this Honda Fireblade SP over here. Let's learn a little bit more about the 2017 CBR1000RR.
So those of you who are up on your CBR history will notice that this 2017 bike right here is the refresh after about a decade long of running without any changes from like 2008 to 2016. The bike basically was perfect and Honda was like, yeah, it's good enough. And then they came back after being demolished by bikes like the R1 and they were like, we need to make a bike that's better. So they made this bike right here with a 999cc inline 4 pumping out 189 horsepower and 84 foot-pounds of torque. Now that is less than the bigger bikes out there, but it is lighter at 432 pounds, which is only 2 pounds heavier than a ZX6R, which is pretty crazy. And when you're sitting on this motorcycle, it really doesn't feel much bigger than a 600. Now, this bike right here does have fully adjustable suspension, although it is Showa as opposed to crazy Olin suspension. And it has Tokiko brakes, which you'll notice is pretty much a bargain bin part compared to the crazy stoppers that are on the CBR1000RR. There are a few other changes here and there, like the frame on this motorcycle is completely different and the swing arm is also completely different. But another thing you're going to notice is sitting on both of these bikes, the ergonomics package is very different. Why don't we get a quick little ergo check on both these bikes?
All right, guys, I'm about 5'11", 165 pounds, 32-inch inseam. And as I swing a leg over the Honda Fireblade SP over here, I just can't get away from the fact that this motorcycle is serious business. It's wide, it's imposing, it feels like a super bike, it feels like a race bike because that's what Honda designed for it to do. The handlebars are nice and wide, very aggressive, and the peg height is very high on this machine. You can tell just by the way it sits, it pushes your peg so far up, it basically makes your back go towards the front of here as if it's telling you to push your weight over that front wheel so you can really cram down those braking zones. This is an extremely aggressive ergonomics package, so much so that a lot of top-level racers de-aggressify it a little bit. They actually lower the pegs and bring the bars up a little bit too. But let's see how Spite feels on this race bike over here.
So throwing a leg over the Fireblade here, this bike is just wild the way it sits. It's unlike pretty much any other motorcycle that I've ever sat on, because you can really tell how purposeful it is. The seat is just like hard as a plank, and at 6'4", 230 pounds, this motorcycle feels like I am just completely cramped into it. It's very obvious that this is not meant for your Sunday cruising, shall we say. The reach to the bars is super aggressive, especially thanks to that peg height. Like Yam said, you are forced forward, and it really forces you to engage your core no matter where you're doing. And you could be doing 150 miles an hour, or you could be doing 25, and you're always riding like this. Now, let's bring Yam back in on the CBR1000RR and see how that compares to this motorcycle.
All right, guys, swinging a leg over the Honda CBR1000RR here. Some specs on me. I'm about 5'11", 32-inch inseam, about 165 pounds. Basically, all motorcycles are designed around people my size, so I feel very lucky. But when we swing a leg over the Fireblade here, the first thing I notice is the dimensions are quite small. As Spite said, this reminds me so much of a mid-2000s 600 sized motorcycle. The view out of the cockpit's really nice and small. The reach to the bars is actually not that bad. It is a super sport styled motorcycle, so you do notice your pegs come up here a little bit, but compared to new age leader bikes like the R1 and the SP Fireblade, this is actually pretty comfortable. As you'll see, you can definitely get in the pocket of this bike and learn to use your cores and your knees a little bit more to sit here in a more comfortable position. But why don't we get Spite on this bike and see how he feels too.
Alrighty guys, so throwing a leg over this with my 6'4", 230 pound self with my 34-ish inch inseam on this bike. It's actually really easy to flat foot because the seat height's only like 32 inches or something like that. And grabbing the pegs and the handlebars, it feels basically like the RS660 to me. It's a little bit more aggressive, but not by a ton. It's a motorcycle that's actually shockingly easy to just sit on and enjoy. I can kind of see how my buddy uses this as a daily rider. It's a fairly small motorcycle too, but I don't feel like I'm cramped on it. I have room to move around forward and backwards. It's actually surprisingly comfortable.
All right, guys, we've learned a little bit more about this CBR1000RR over here. Now it's time to get them both out on the road and see how they ride.
All right, ladies and germs, we are aboard the two Honda Fireblades. One is the actual RRR Fireblade. This is the pretender to the throne, let's say, the older street-biased bike. And man, Spite, I think there's so much to say about these two bikes, having ridden the opposite ones in here. You rode this bike, I rode that one. We just swapped off. Now we're gonna chat about them. What is the first thing you notice on the big bad Fireblade SP?
The first thing I notice instantly is the front end feel on this thing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so good. And you know, I know I'm not good enough to really use it all, but I can still appreciate how just like almost angelic it feels.
Yeah, I was telling you in the shop before we left that every time I touch the Fireblade or move it around, it's like a choir of angels just starts, you know, going, ah, you know. It's so magical.
The riding this thing around, I feel like $1,000,000. It's so cool.
And it's funny because when I'm on this bike, having ridden the Fireblade in, man, this is such a comfortable street-biased motorcycle. This is the classic Fireblade ethos of ride it around all week and then thrash it at the track and have a good time doing it. I'm so much more comfortable on this bike than the Fireblade SP. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm really already feeling the change in the ergonomics, how high the pegs are on this bike.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, this motorcycle, the pegs are way lower, way more amenable, way easier to live with and ride. This is one of those bikes you can totally get used to riding on the daily, as your buddy does with this thing. And I just feel like the Fireblade SP is just like, it's such an unapologetic race bike, you know?
Yeah, it makes no excuses for what it is. And one thing I'm also noticing here is the gears are so crazy long.
Yeah, are you still just in first?
No, I kicked it up into second gear just because I wanted to do something with my time.
Yeah.
But I could just sit like here, kick it down into first gear, and now I'm just cruising in first.
Yeah, so for me, kind of flicking the CBR1000RR here through a couple corners, that front end feel is vastly different. And that's due to the fact that this bike has a totally different frame, totally different geometry than the Fireblade SP, and it's way more street biased, but these are known for being able to do some serious damage too. I don't want you guys to think that you're gonna miss out on anything by not having the world's most angelic, perfect front end feel like the Fireblade SP has. This is still an awesome and capable motorcycle. It just feels more normal, you know, it just feels more like a normal motorcycle where I look down in the cockpit here, looking at my handlebars, looking at my clip-ons. It feels way more like a normal motorcycle that we've all kind of come to be used to. Whereas the Fireblade SP, the cockpit view is just like, you can't ever think you're not on something special.
Oh,
ever.
yeah, no. Looking down and seeing the electronic loops coming out of the top of the suspension, the dashboard, it's just so cool looking. You know, it literally feels like $1 million.
Now, the one thing both of these bikes have in common, despite people online being like, oh my god, the Fireblade SP is so much faster, both of them are so much more performance than you could ever access safely on the street. My god, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like, you just give both of these a squeeze and you're going so fast.
Giving the CBR1000RR a little squeeze there. And I gotta say, the Fireblade does feel faster.
I think, actually, the Fireblade feels faster at about $8,000 once the valve opens up.
Yeah, you gotta really get it. Once it gets on the boil, though, that thing's got so much top-end power, it's insane.
Yeah, I like the down-low grunt on the double R a little bit more just because it's more usable in lower gears and you can actually shift the gears around.
Yeah.
You know, like you would on a normal street bike. But feeling that once that valve opens in the exhaust at $8,000,
oh man,
it's
it absolutely
party time.
flies. It flies. It's so much fun. But man, I just can't believe, you know, how far we've come in terms of leader bikes of what they offer nowadays, like the R1Ms of the world, the Fireblade SPs, the S1000RRs. They're so aggressive. They're so over the top. You know, it seems like all these manufacturers have been chasing this market that just says, we demand literal race bikes and we don't want anything else. Whereas the Fireblade's ethos has always been, be a great street bike first and then be a competent track bike second. And I gotta say, I really like this thing a lot. This is such a sweet, classic feeling squid missile, you know?
Yeah, it has a lot of the like Gixxer quality about it, where you can ride it on the daily and squeeze out a ton of power and do crazy, you know, pulls on the highway. And then, you know, when you actually get your act together, you can go take it to the track. Ooh, man. Yeah.
Now, one thing I just noticed there too, and I wanted to get your opinion on it, front brake feel, night and day difference. Night and day difference. Oh my god.
It's almost like having top shelf Brembo Stylema calipers on 330 mil rotors is, you know, really, really good.
Yeah, I think for this bike, you could keep the Tokikos, but you're going to need to get some pads. You're going to need to get an RCS 17 or a 19. But and you're still going to approximate the feeling of that brake lever on that bike, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the front brake feel here is just sublime, you know? You get so much feel out of it. It's so progressive and so smooth. It's got a ton of bite right off the jump, too.
Yeah, but I gotta say, our thesis for today's video is the Fireblade RR half the bike that the Triple R is? And here's my take on it, and it kind of goes back to, a lot of hobbies are like this, but I think cycling comes to mind, where after a certain price point, you're really just getting those itty-bitty frosting on top marginal gains, you know? Yeah. I feel like this thing at $16,000 is it's all the leader bike anyone would ever really need, but I think for a lot of folks, they like the feeling of like, no, I want my leader bike to be the true superlative. I need it to be electronic suspension, crazy frame, bespoke, limited edition, all this junk, but it's absolutely not half the bike that the other one is. What do you think?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I don't even think it's close to half the bike. Like that, it has so much under the hood that, you know, a normal human being just can't tap into.
I gotta say too, this double R here with these simple mods, just this Leo exhaust, great classic sound. Like, I mean, this is just your squid missile. I love bikes like this, man. This is great.
Yeah, it's the the bike that you probably actually want, even though you really think you want this guy right here. You know, you're like, oh, I love the flashy paint. I need the race bike performance. I need the everything, the blah, blah, blah. You really don't, man.
And you kind of don't want that because that doesn't really work that great on the street, honestly, you know?
No, like you get your cool winglets, but what is the point? You're not going to be able to go fast enough to even feel downforce.
No, and I gotta tell you, as a guy who does a lot of track days, club racing, very into sport bikes, love them, I'm having more fun on this double R on the street than I am on the Fireblade. This is more enjoyable.
Yeah, I really do appreciate the comfort package on that. The ergonomic setup is really nice. I like the just grunt down low that this doesn't really have. All of its power is at the very tippy top.
The Fireblade SP is literally like R6 power band. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it has a ton of power. Like, holy cow, it has a ton of power. But there's so much work to get to it. I gotta say, looking at the double R in the rear view mirror, it does not look as cool.
Absolutely not. The Fireblade SP has curb appeal that is just out of this world. It is so cool.
Yeah, like when I was riding that thing in and you were behind me and I saw it in the mirror, it has such an aggressive look. It can't be mistaken for anything other than what it is.
And to that point, you know, wouldn't you say that that's what flashy sport bikes are meant to do? They're meant to, you know, elicit an emotional response and to have you just be like, wow, that is the craziest, flashiest looking thing I've ever seen, you know?
I suppose, but is it worth $28,500 to you?
I would never spend that much money on a motorcycle. I only did it because it's a giveaway bike. You know me, all my bikes are under 10 grand except for the sled. I just can't will myself to pay 5 digits for a motorcycle, man. That's insane, especially one that ostensibly I'm meant to thrash around a racetrack, you know?
I honestly do believe that in terms of probably pinnacle street curb appeal motorcycles, leader bikes anyway, the R1 is probably where it's at.
Absolutely. And I know this video is not about the R1, but holy moly, I would have an R1. Absolutely.
Like it has the, you know, the aggressive looking DRLs. It's got all that good stuff.
Yeah, and the thing just absolutely rails around a racetrack.
And it doesn't have the, you know, $28,000 price tag.
Yeah. Well, Spike, that was a great little vlog. I think the people, you know what, Spike, the people really want to see some highway action on these bad boys, wouldn't you say? They want to know which one's faster, which one pulls in the revs. We've been poodling in second gear. I think we got to get out there and wring these necks.
Oh boy, here we go.
Let's go! This is why I don't own a leader bike, guys. They just elicit bad behavior. Well, Spike, here we find ourselves on a pretty wide open road on two bikes that make well near 200 horsepower. This one over 200 technically, even though this US spec version, what they claim like 170 to the wheel, something like that.
Nah, I think they claim a solid like 186.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
They limited it for some reason. I guess they just realized that we're not adult mature enough to withstand 215 to the wheel.
Yeah, we're not worthy. However, this bike, you guys already know, gonna get that full system exhaust and spicy ECU tune to make sure that it makes the full bananas power. Now, before we do send it into infinity like we're wont to do, why don't we do a higher gear pull to show the bottom end punch? Because you and I have been riding these bikes, and we've really noticed how they have a pretty big difference in bottom end punch.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
What do you want to do, 4th or 5th gear or something like that?
I think 5th gear is a good test bed right there.
All right, so I'm gonna chop it up to 5th gear here. I'm in 5th now, about 5,000 RPM.
All right, and 3, 2, 1.
I mean, look at that, guys.
And now I felt myself get into that top end.
Yeah, but I mean, that bike is literally right there, if not faster, with a pretty substantial weight difference between the two of us from the 5th gear pull. So even though they're both 1,000 cc's, that was awesome, right? I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you want out of a street bike. You want enough jump, right? You know, you want that low end feel, you want that grunt, you want some nice power, because you're not always going to be spending your time at the top of the power band. Nobody wants to leave an engine screaming off the top all the time.
Unless you're an R6 rider.
Yeah, but then you probably got some other problems you need to work out with a therapist.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, as you guys can tell, the CBR1000RR has a much wider spread of torque, revs a little bit lower than the Fireblade SP, and so it makes itself way more amenable for that low-end grunty power. And I really felt it when I rode that bike too.
Yeah, it's really nice to just kind of cruise below $5,000 and be able to roll and just feel the bike go, you know?
Yeah.
It's what you want. And everybody thinks that, you know, oh, I'm gonna be fine, I'm gonna leave it screaming off the top. Sure you are. Sure.
Well, now speaking of screaming off the top, we do have to do this here run in Mexico and see how we do.
All right. Twist my arm, why don't you?
I'm curious to see what's gonna happen, because that thing's fast, dude. It's not a slow bike.
No, it really isn't.
But this thing is ballistic, and it's not even tuned. Like, it's still just bone stock settings. All right, I'll give us the honks. We'll do it from 50. On my third honk.
Yep. 2. Man!
Woo!
I hung with you, man.
I know, that's crazy. Even from second gear, I saw you pulling right near me.
That was cool. That was really cool. Good
I
job,
actually-
Double R.
I actually saw the power band difference, because I heard you hitting third gear, and I was still in second, creeping up on that top end, and then I finally got into third, and then I think I started walking away a little bit, but that wasn't as big of a difference as I thought.
No, it really wasn't, especially given our weight difference. If you were on this, you would have beat me.
Yeah, so this bike is about 15 pounds heavier, if I remember correctly, but then I'm like 50, 60 pounds lighter than you, so
Yeah.
turning left here.
Yep.
All right.
That little Texas exit right there.
I love
Yeah.
how traffic is just now catching us again. I have no idea how fast I went. I got into basically top of fourth.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I buried it in second, and then I buried it in third. And I think I shifted too soon out of second. I think I could have given second a little bit longer.
I think you short shifted second, because I heard you shifting to third whenever I was still in second.
This thing is so fast.
Yeah, this thing's a f***ing rocket ship. Oh my God, every gear just pulls harder and harder. Holy moly, this thing's fast. It's got these really tightly spaced gears, so it just goes whap, whap, whap. You're like, fuck. And the dash just like flashed. Like, I seriously had like an out-of-body experience. I had no idea how fast I was going. The dash is just like flashing. Like, everything's just like bending around me, you know? But with all that being said, I think now it's time to wrap this sucker up, isn't it?
Yep.
Woo-wee, I tell you what, there's another Yammie new video right over here waiting for you. It's Yosemite Yam, back at it again, upgraded from Cowboy Yam by popular demand. Tell you what, click on this video right over here, gonna get you cowboying, hooting and hollering, having all kinds of fun, cutting up with your buddies out there watching another Yammie new video. Woo-wee!